All right, thank you very much, Anne. So, my name's Nat. I'm going to introduce myself a bit more as I go along. The first thing I wanted to say is that I was one of the lucky people who got an advanced copy of Anne's book, and it's good, buy it. And like you said, if you want to make a writer happy, do leave a review. Mine's already on there. So Anne and I were talking about coaching and her book and personal development the other day. And she did say it's really quite wonderful that pretty much everybody who starts to do this kind of work ends up being confirmed onto their path. So, because life happens, and sometimes it's not very good. Sometimes there's a little bit of struggle along the way, and sometimes we get a little bit knocked out of alignment. And this is what happened to me, but I started doing coaching in 2012 for myself. Now I do it professionally. And the more I do it, and the more I explore a whole bunch of other things, the more things start to happen to me, which I can only describe as sort of magical. So that's why the title of my book today is, title of my talk, I'm so obsessed with books. The title is Be Realistic, Expect Miracles. Because we're not used to thinking along these lines, but as you will see, I think the more we think this way, the more we can create a little bit of magic in our lives. So, like Anne said, I'm a writer, I write fiction, I'm a storyteller, so I'm just going to share a few stories about some weird synchronicities that have happened to me along the way. I'd like to start with a quote from Mark Twain, who wrote Tom Sawyer and Huckleberry Finn, that sort of thing. And he said, amongst other things, he said something that pretty much conspiracy theories probably going to like here. He said, if voting changed anything, could change anything, they wouldn't let us do it. And he also said, nice piece of advice, never argue with stupid people because they will drag you down to their level and then they will beat you with experience. So the quote I want to focus on today is the two best things in somebody's life are the day they are born and the day they figure out why. So I thought I was pretty lucky because in my life I always knew that I wanted to be a writer. And as far back as I can remember, I was great at school at writing. I was great at writing essays. The teachers actually would give me the work of my mates and ask me to correct it. So now I'm an editor, maybe that's why. I also, when I was 10 years old, I created a little newspaper with my sister. And then I started to rewrite the endings of books I had read according to what I wanted to see happen. And then after that, I realized that there were some stories and some characters I wanted to hear about. And the books didn't exist. So this is how I kind of started to write my own stories. And I think it was around that time, around 15 years old, that I told my parents that really there was no need to worry about university or school or any of that stuff for me, because I was going to be a writer. And in her book, Anne talks about the importance of communication and the power of good communication. And I have to say, I had no idea. I didn't have a clue. And I think I probably scared my parents to death when I told them that, don't worry about school, I'm going to quit and be a professional writer. And as a result, I think I received a lot of fear back in return from them. And I was told to stop dreaming, which is kind of funny because of what I'm going to tell you in a bit. And I was told to get my head straight, which is, again, kind of funny if you know me. Get my head straight about real life. And by real life, that meant the stuff that is out there. So your circumstances, everything that is around you, everything that's been given to you. And pretty much they told me to be like everybody else. Don't follow your dreams, don't follow your passion. Just keep your head down, don't make any noise, don't be different. And then if you're lucky, you'll get to the end of your life and nothing bad will happen to you. Pretty much you can die. That's it, tick in the box and there you go. Now, that was an instruction manual for being human that I was given, which really I didn't think was going to work for me. And sure enough, it didn't work for me. And a few years later, I ended up with a big, massive breakdown. And like Craig said earlier, sometimes stuff happens which at the time you think is really, really horrible. But what came out of that really was probably the best thing that happened to me, because I found NLP, I found coaching and personal development. And then it was a little bit, I started to get a lot of change. And I think if you start to do this kind of work, you'll notice that things start to change in your life really pretty quickly. And I was getting some of that, and I thought, well, I'm going to start writing again. And I was a little bit worried about it, because as Anne knows now, and Craig probably, and anybody who's written a book, when you put a book out there, you may not think people are going to read it, but they're going to read it. And that's a little bit frightening. So the big question in my head at the time was, am I doing the right thing? Am I going the right way? Am I following the right path? And you may have heard the saying that when a student is ready, a teacher appears. And that teacher for me appeared in the way of past life regression. So I heard somebody on the radio who talked about that. She was a past life regression therapist. She was really, really good. And I got really excited about it, and I told myself I have to get her tape and I have to try it out for myself and see what happens. So I did that. I went home one day, put the tape on, put the headphones on, closed my eyes, followed the regression. And then I'm not really sure how it happened, but all of a sudden I kind of wasn't in the room anymore, wasn't really aware of my body anymore, and I found myself in the middle of a really busy street. And it was quite a lot different than the street out there is right now. So there were no cars, but there were lots of people on horseback, horse-drawn carriages, and people were dressed a little bit funny, like old-time dress, And then I kind of looked down on myself and I thought, oh, well, that's a little bit weird, because I was a guy, right? So once I got over the shock of that and, the amazement, I looked at myself and I was wearing a suit, black trousers, black shoes. I had a little white shirt on with the sleeves rolled up, and I had short hair. I had little round glasses, and I had a stylish hat on my head, and I was going straight ahead to a building over there, and that was the offices of the Boston Herald in Massachusetts, Boston Herald newspaper. And somehow I knew that the year was 1902. My name was Jake, and I was a reporter for the Boston Herald. So I got hit with all of that knowledge out of nowhere. Needless to say, that had a big impact on me, because from my thinking at the time of, well, I'm a little bit worried and I don't know where I'm going with this stuff, all of a sudden everything was lighting up around me, and I was making connections to everything. Like, no wonder I want to be a writer, because, apparently I've got connections to that. And oh, yeah, remember 10 years old, I was writing the little newspaper, where I wonder where that came from. And I thought, well, okay, so if I am a writer, really, over the years I've built some limiting beliefs about myself that I couldn't really do it because everybody told me that. So I've taken that on, and I thought, I'm just going to give that back. And I am going to be a writer, and I'm going to do it completely and fully and not be worried about it anymore. So I changed that belief that I had from I can't do it and I'm not good enough to I will do it. Now, 9 books later, that's what my Amazon page looks like. And really, I'm not showing you this because I'm showing off or anything, although I'm kind of showing off really, and it's looking good. But this is just an example of what you can do, what happens when you change your belief about what you can or cannot do, and you stop focusing on the story, what you can't make, the things that you want to make happen, and instead you put all of your energy, like Craig was saying, into creating the stuff that you really want. So I started to do that, and that was the beginning of my life becoming a lot better. Not magical yet, but a lot better. And then the magic started to happen, because after that, I became aware of something that's called the formula. And the formula says that, and I'm sure you've heard it in lots of different ways, but basically basically, it says that if you follow your highest excitement, your bliss, your passion, whatever you choose to call it, if you follow that to the best of your ability, with no insistence on what you want to see happen at the end, then the universe will support you. Now, I don't know about you, but this was, at the time, it still is, probably the nicest, most exciting, most enjoyable, and happiest thing I'd ever heard in my entire life. And it was also the scariest and craziest thing I'd ever heard, because this idea that the universe is going to support you, it kind of requires a big dose of faith in something that you didn't even know what it is, to be honest. But I thought, you know what, I think I'm going to, go with it. And you can imagine if somebody that you know came to you and said, hey, guess what, I'm going to quit my job because I'm going to follow my highest excitement, and you know what, the universe is going to support you. You probably think that they're a little bit funny in the head. So I did. I quit my job on the basis of that belief that if I did follow my highest excitement, everything was going to be going well for me. And at the same time, I was having to pay off the balance on a car that I bought on lease 4 years earlier. And the balance was £3,600. Now, to say that I was worried about this is an understatement. I used to wake up at night, kind of like panic attack, heart beating, thinking, what on earth am I doing? And every time that this happened, I would actually get that belief sounding in my head, like, don't worry about it, follow your highest excitement, you'll be okay, you're fine. So I did follow my highest excitement. At around the same time, I happened to go to a networking event where for writers. And this guy was standing in the middle of the room and saying, I can't believe there's still some stupid people out there who pay taxes on their American book sales. And 99.999% of all my sales happen in the US. And up until that time, for about 2 years, I've been paying taxes. So I waited until the break. And then I went to see him and I said, I'm one of these stupid people who is still paying taxes. Can you tell me how not to do that? And he was nice enough to tell me, and he said, by the way, I think you could get a refund. So I thought, okay, well, I hired an accountant, and I had to do a lot of paperwork for the IRS. I had to go down to London to do more paperwork. And, at the end of it, I got my refund, check from the IRS, and guess how much it was? £3,600. I promise you, that's a true story. And then I heard this little voice in my head that said, so what part of, if you follow your highest excitement and passion, the universe is going to support you, have you got a problem with? Do you not trust yet? So I was feeling quite a little bit better, and I thought, well, okay then. At the time, I was writing this book. Again, I'm not showing off, there's a reason I'm showing you this book. It takes place in Egypt. And I thought, my highest excitement was saying to me, Nat, you should really go on a research trip and make sure that what you've written is kind of okay. So I thought, well, I haven't got any money, but highest excitement, so yeah, I'll go to Egypt, no problem. So I jumped on the plane, went there, and that's when my sense of kind of the idea that, my dream world, which is where the story came from, so it came out of somewhere in my imagination, and then it ended up in a physical book that I can hold in my hand. And then throughout the 10 days that I was in Egypt, what I did is I actually lived out the lives of the characters in the book who are not real and came out of my dream world, but I made them real in the physical, really, because I was living out the story. And the kind of boundaries between what's in here and what's out there, if there is something out there, kind of started to blur for me, right? So I'm going along, and then I got on a train to go from Cairo to Aswan, which is a 12-hour train, sleeper train in Egypt. Thought I was going to die several times throughout the night, but I made it there. And then I stood in front of my hotel in Aswan, so the Nile is in front of me, like in the book cover that came out of my imagination dream world. And I'm standing in front of it, on the other side, desert as far as the eye can see. And then it looked like this. So I don't know if you can see, but at that point, I kind of went a little bit, really physically, went a little bit floaty in my head because I thought, well, hang on a minute, so this is the book that came out of my dream world, and now I've been spending 10 days bringing that into reality, into the physical, and then I'm looking at my book cover, which is, you know, not a real thing, but I'm looking at it in the real thing, out there sort of thing. And I'd kind of been aware of the idea that perhaps, you know, perhaps there's not that much of a difference between the world of the in here and the world of the out there sort of thing. You know, the world I'd always been told to kind of concentrate on because that was real and what was in here wasn't real. All of a sudden I was thinking, what if it's the other way around? So I wasn't really sure. But I thought, you know what, this business of following my highest excitement and writing books seems to be working pretty well for me. So I started writing another book. And it's funny that, because this one takes place in the Amazon jungle, not far from where you did your thing. And I did a little bit of research about the Amazon and kind of, from what I read, decided I don't really want to go there because there's lots of animals that you described. I don't want to go there. But I did a lot of research on it, on the internet. And basically I researched what's the weather like, what are the animals like, what would it take to go on an expedition in the jungle, what equipment would I need, what food would I need to bring with me, how would it happen, and all that stuff. And I did that for about 10 days at the beginning of writing the book. I put a lot of emotion, a lot of intent, a lot of really excitement and attention into the research that I made. And you were talking about jaguars earlier. I actually wrote the sentence one day, one afternoon when I was at home, and I wrote the sentence about the characters being a little bit worried because they found themselves still out at night, past the time when the jaguars started lurking through the forest in search of their next meal. And then I thought, I'm going to have a cup of tea, have a break, have a cup of tea. So I went to the kitchen, started making a cup of tea, and then looked out the window, and the sky people were there, as in the like broadband engineers, sky people, you know, not the, but maybe soon, hopefully. Anyway, so I looked out the window, and I don't know if you know, if you've noticed, but the sky people got their cars a little bit kind of, bespoke. They've got specific designs and things like that on their cars. And I'm looking at that car, and it was the most beautiful thing I'd ever seen. I'll tell you why in a second. And all I did is I left my tea there, and I walked over back to the lounge, and I stood in front of the window because I knew that that car was coming to my building. I just knew it. And sure enough, the guy turned around and went all the way around the close, and then he came to park right in front of my window. And then his car looked like this. So then I was laughing to myself because if you could have cracked my head open, and insofar as we think that the dream world is in our heads, which is not, but if you could have cracked my head open, here's the jaguars I've just written about, like that very afternoon in that sentence. Here's the jungle everywhere, and in the book, one of my characters is a photographer for National Geographic, and that's what it says on the car, right? So at that point, I was not even kind of wondering if maybe there is something about the idea that the world out there, this stuff, could be only ever a reflection of what is in here, in my head, my dream world sort of thing. And I think, I think pretty much if you kind of wake up to that idea, if you start to living along those lines, which is what I've been doing more of, since that stuff happened, I think this is how you can create a little bit more magic in your life. Now, there's a guy called Tim Freak. He's an author and a philosopher. He wrote a wonderful book called Lucid Living. And that book is about that very idea. And so it's the idea that maybe we are living in a dream. Maybe we think we are, all awake. Maybe we think we're awake right now, and all of this is real, and there's an outside world sort of thing. And what if we were asleep and dreaming, like a lucid dream? This is based on the idea that when you have a lucid dream at night, what happens is that you are asleep, but suddenly you wake up, and you know you're asleep, and you know you're in a dream, and you're dreaming, but you're aware that you're doing it. And the most amazing things can happen when people have that experience. All of a sudden, you can decide that you're going to get up and go and have a fly around the city or something, or you can click your fingers and there, boom, you're on the other side of the world and that kind of thing. So I started to live more and more following the idea that maybe this is a dream. And if it's a dream and I can live lucidly, then I can wake up in the dream and I can make things happen for myself that at the beginning of the talk I said I could only describe as magical. Now I don't think they're magical anymore. I think they are miracles, and I think they are the norm. So I'm just going to finish by asking you a question, and I'm just wondering what would happen and what you could make happen, perhaps, if you started to live with the idea that maybe you are dreaming. And I wonder what kind of magic you could create in your life if you just decided that you're going to wake up in your dream. Just an idea. So anyway, now my highest excitement is telling me I'm going to have a glass of wine. Thank you very much for listening. Like I said, Anne's book is great. Live her reviews, the best thing you can do for a writer. If you want to read my books, I've got some bookmarks over there. I do editing, I do coaching, and just have a look and get in touch if you want to. Thank you very much.